like to introduce to you the wonderful Julie Tasker, who is a teacher and an art person, art quilter, art textiles. She does some magnificent work. I've watched Julie grow and blossom over the last few years. And Julie won highly commended in our SOTA competition, which is state of the art, with a gorgeous little what was it called? Magpie? On the Hunt. It's a magpie. It's stunning. Oh, shush. Ignore my phone. So Julie, please come and talk about your quilts and show your quilts. Thank you.
Thanks, Judy. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much to Heather and the committee for the invitation to speak to you today. Some of you might have known my mum, Chris Tasker. She was a member around about 2009 to 2013. And my sewing journey began with my mum. I have early memories of sitting next to her in the sewing room. She was a knitwit teacher. Some of you might have also done knitwit in the 80s. She dressed our whole family with the stretch fabric. And so she was sewing on her beloved Benina, and I was sewing on a tiny little plastic sewing machine. All it did was put holes into paper. But I have such fond memories of that time with Mum. I then progressed to a real sewing machine when I was about 8 years old. Santa brought me an old hand crank Singer. It was the best Christmas present ever. I started making little dolly clothes. And then when I was about 9 or 10, my mum was invited to a patchwork lesson by a knitwit friend. And she learned how to take perfectly good fabric, cut it up into little pieces, sew it up again, and then quilt it. Why would you ever do that? She became addicted very quickly. And then because Mum was sewing up bits of fabric and cutting it up, sewing it back together again, I did the same thing and made my first dolly quilt when I was about 10 years old. That was in 1990. We've got one of my early pieces, thank you, which was 1991. So I grew up in Zimbabwe, and this was in the Harare Patchwork and Quilting Show, and that won a prize in that show. That was my first prize-winning quilt back in 1991. In 1992 in Zimbabwe, they had a big education push about Save the Rhinos, and I remember them coming to our school to talk about Save the Rhino. And so I did this quilt. At that time in Zimbabwe, we called that sort of work innovative. So it wasn't textile art or anything fancy like that. That was in the innovative category. So I did that for the rhinos. Now you just saw incredible work by Lynn. That is the sort of work I can't do. I have joked for years that I can't cut or sew straight. So this quilt here is the hen and chicks pattern. My mum had made one and I thought it was really beautiful, so I thought, oh, I'll give it a go. And it wasn't a great idea because none of my points were pointy. So I then had to turn it into an innovative quilt by sewing on buttons and ribbons and little precious things to hide all the points that weren't pointy. If you've known me 5 minutes, you know that I just love cats. And if you follow me on Facebook, you see the antics of my two Siamese. This quilt was a one-of-a-kind quilt that I made in about 1997. So for Christmas, I was given a big pack of fabric with all these cat fabrics, and I did the one-of-a-kind quilt, which was a new concept to me, but I liked this because I could make up the rules as I went and just make it fit. And then I hand quilted this one, and this also won a prize at the Harare Patchwork and Quilting Show. This is another quilt with lots of African fabrics that I made in my early years in Australia after I moved here in 2006. I was pining for Africa, so I bought these fabrics online. If you look closely, the points aren't pointy. But I was beyond caring, and Mum would have loved me to unpick and redo, but that just didn't feature in what I would do, so it is how it is. In my early days as a member of Queensland Quilters, I went to a workshop with Lorraine Carthew. Is Lorraine here today? No? just an outstanding teacher, and she's contributed so much to quilting in Queensland and Australia. So she taught the pictorial collage technique. So this is probably my second one using her technique. Again, pining for Africa at the time. So these are elephants in Mana Pools, which is my favourite place on the planet. This is at the border between Zimbabwe and Zambia to the north. The Zambezi River flows along there, and we would go camping there in a tent. Our first trip, we put the tent under an apple ring tree. We were green, we didn't know that the elephants love to eat the seed pods of that tree. And every day at 4 o'clock, this big bull elephant came to pick up that day's droppings of the seed pods. It was an unbelievable experience. So the elephant was closer to me than Judy is to me now. We were just sitting on the camp chairs. He came very carefully, picked up all the pods off the roof of the tent, all around the floor, on the ground, and he also rubbed his leg on the rope of the tent because he had a bit of an itch. Just an incredible experience from an amazing place. I've done lots of experimenting. I do probably, some would say, too many different techniques. I love being a member of the Two Quackers. That is our art quilt group in Queensland, Quilters. We meet on the last Saturday of the month. And one of my early meetings, we learned to do this discharge dyeing, which is where you apply bleach, which takes out the colour that's been added to the fabric and can leave very interesting colours behind. So this was a bit of a make it up as I go, cut out different pieces to make it all fit. So these were amazing large gum leaves. I painted the bleach on the back, laid it onto the fabric, let it sit for about 24 hours, then took it off with just beautiful prints left behind. I've already spoken about my cats. And this is Toki and Shumba looking out the window. I hadn't had Toki maybe a month at this stage. She completely idolized Shumba from the moment she came home, and that was him teaching her how to look out the window at the birds. Toki's predecessor was Mally. What an angel little cat that was. This was my favorite photo of Mally, so I had to make it into a quilt. So I did free motion stitching onto canvas with black thread, and then I painted with the Inktense pencils. If you come to the art quilt group, you'll learn all about these sorts of techniques. I learned about the process of felting. It was very funny. Mum and I went to a Benina Club meeting at Chermside, and Bree was working at the shop at the time, and she demonstrated the attachment to the Benina machine where you can do needle felting. And so she showed us the wool roving and then barbed needles that go up and down at speed through the wool to attach it to a base fabric. And I thought it was pretty cool. And Mum told me about this process of wet felting where people lay out the layers of wool, they wet it, and they roll it hundreds of times, and it all joins together to make a new fabric essentially. And I screwed up my nose and thought, who on earth would want to do that? But having seen Bree use the wool roving, I went to a shop to buy some, and I saw a wet felted sample, and I fell in love. So I went to do a workshop. Halfway through the workshop, I texted Mum to say, I'm addicted to this already. This is my first entry into the SOTA exhibition. So you've heard Lynn mention SOTA, Judy mentioned SOTA, state-of-the-art exhibition. That's our art quilt exhibition of Queensland Quilters that goes into galleries in Queensland. So this was wet felted with silk as well. So that means it's Nuno felted, some of the pieces. So there was a silk base, and then I put the wool on the other side and felted it, meaning I rolled it hundreds of times. I then did some dyeing with special wool dye, and then joined those pieces and then did a little bit more felting to help it to all join together. The felting continued for quite a while after that with gusto. This won a blue ribbon at the Queensland Quilt Show. I called it tie-by, which is a word meaning bamboo. When I was doing art at school, I had done an ink painting of bamboo, because the bamboo was just outside the window. And this is inspired by that painting that I did. And the colour graduations of the wool roving that I bought, they naturally just lent themselves so beautifully to that one. Lynn had an Uluru piece. This is my Uluru piece. And this was another entry into the SOTA exhibition. I had been to Uluru, seen the Field of Lights, seen those funny trees out there that make me think of Dr. Seuss trees. And that was inspired by my trip out to the Red Centre. Another felted piece inspired by a holiday to Tuscany. This is, yeah, we had some holidays in Mozambique in a little town called Vilanculos, and there were these big red cliffs near the beach there. So this one is entitled Vilanculos, from that part of the coast. Again, wet felting for the wool piece in the middle. In COVID times, I did an online workshop with Irene Roderick, who's an outstanding improvisational artist. Her story is quite incredible. And it was so much fun to do this on Zoom. Each of us were asked to set up a design wall behind our machine, and then we had an iPad or laptop next to us while we were working. And she would teach us a concept, we'd make a little block, put it on the wall behind us, and then while we were piecing, we could look at our iPad and see people all around the world and see their design wall and the pieces that they were making, and hear Irene's feedback to each one as they went. So this is a piece I made subsequent to that workshop, entitled Jerusalem, after I'd visited Jerusalem. So down here at the bottom, I've got the Pool of Siloam. This is the Western Wall. This is the Holy Sepulchre, and this is the Via Dolorosa. I spent a lot of time doing different dyeing techniques. This is when I was in my batik phase. Lots of soy wax with the Procyon dye to dye the fabrics. And this one I pieced in Donald Trump's first term. He was talking a lot about the wall. I wasn't very impressed with his idea about having a wall. And I was just playing with the design, and I put a big cross there, and in my head I was saying no to the wall. But I didn't have the courage to call it that. So I gave it another name. I can't remember what the name will be on the back. Batik Addiction, a very safe name. I also went for lessons for quilting because I aspire to be able to quilt like them. If you haven't done a Queensland Quilters workshop, you need to do one. We have got amazing people that teach us what you want to learn next. So I went for workshops with Pam Hill and with Jane Rundle, and in those I learnt that I'm not too keen on ruler quilting, but I'm very much in love with the free motion quilting. So this was done using lots of techniques that I learned from Jane's workshop. Then I did another workshop with her on quilting as you go. So I used my leftovers of all those batik fabrics to do that one. I've fallen in love with bees. I have a little hive of the native TC bees, the sugar bag bees, and then I discovered a bee called a blue-banded bee, which to me is just the most beautiful bee in the whole world. And I didn't even know that we could get them in Brisbane. I will never forget the day I saw one in our garden. I heard a loud buzzing out the window, had a look, and was beside myself with excitement when I saw the blue-banded bee. I then did some research to find out how you attract more to your garden, and they love blue and purple flowers. So I've spent a fortune at Bunnings on blue and purple flowers. I have invested in Airbnbs for the bees, so getting Besser blocks with clay and sand to promote nesting areas for my blue-banded bees, and they're nesting in there. So this quilt was inspired by all the bees in my garden. I've identified 11 different species, and these are my flowers in my garden with my own photos of the bees and the flowers using cyanotypes. So that's a special 2 liquids that you mix together, paint onto the fabric in a dark room with 0 sunlight, and then let it dry. Then you would place a negative from a photo onto that in the sun, and you can watch it just in front of your eyes change from a murky green colour into this exquisite blue colour. The yellow was added with the Inktense pencils. My photography skills have had to develop. It started by accident. I'd made a quilt of a zebra, and I wanted to enter it into a show from Oz Quilt Network. And I wasn't allowed to enter this particular quilt because it was based on somebody else's photo. So I thought, all right, I've got to learn to take better photos. So I went on a workshop, and I found an outstanding teacher, and he's enabled me to learn all of the techniques to be able to get really great photos that have then helped me with all of my quilts. I like entering the AQC challenge each year, and I've been successful for a number of years. A few years ago was their theme Going Green. So if you haven't heard of this challenge, it has to be a 90 centimetre square quilt. There's always a theme. As soon as I heard Going Green, the first thing I thought of was a chameleon literally going green. We had chameleons in the garden in Africa. But I couldn't go and take a photo of a chameleon in Brisbane. So I needed a photo from somebody else. I approached a few online, got no response. So I then, I'd actually given up the idea. It was just too hard to get a photo that I could use. After giving up, maybe a week later, an Australian photographer that I follow was in Madagascar, and she had posted this incredible shot. So I sent her a message to say, may I have permission to use your photo to make a quilt? And she came back to say, are you going to sell it and make money? I said, absolutely not. I'm just wanting to enter it into an exhibition. So she said, go for it. I did send her a photo of my other work so she could see the type of thing that I do. And so she gave me permission. I call this one Metacrosis. I dyed the background with the Procyon, no it wasn't, it was sun dye with Epsom salts, and then it's commercial fabrics in tiny pieces on the front to make the chameleon. I also did Trapunto to make him puff out a little bit more. Judy mentioned that I'm a teacher, so the way I earn money to put thread in the machine and fabric under the foot is by teaching children with learning difficulties. Most of them have dyslexia, so it keeps me very busy, it's very challenging. And in my lessons with the students, in the early lessons, I need to teach them a little bit about their brain and how it works, because they need to understand why I'm going to ask them to do things again and again and again. So I teach them that these are their neurons, which are their brain cells. We were all born with 100 billion of those. Every time we do something, we build a connection from one neuron to another. The more we do that, the stronger that neural connection becomes, until it's quick and easy and effortless for us to be able to do that thing, whatever that thing is. So I did this for the AQC challenge that was themed magic, and I called it neuroplastic magic. So you might have heard of that term as neuroplastic. It's not that our brains are plastic as such, it's more that it's plasticine and malleable. So our brains can change. That's good for my students because we need to change their brain for them to be able to learn to read. But it's also good for us as we age. Our brains are plastic. We can change them. We can continue to build those neural connections. Following the Irene Roderick workshop, a group of us, mainly in Australia, continued to meet on a semi-regular basis, which was just such a great way to network and get ideas and learn from others who are much more experienced than I am. And in one of those meetings, they were talking about a word quilt, which I'd never really heard of. And one of the mums was just so furious with the battle she had with her children over screen time. So she painted screen time onto fabric and she chopped it up with a rotary cutter because she was so mad. Then she joined all the pieces together, and the incredible shapes that were formed by just the pieces of the letters rearranged was really quite interesting. So I got into the word quilts. This is my first one. This is Dyslexia 1. We've now got 6 of these. So this is my, I did the batik soy wax on fabric and then dyed it with the Procyon dye. I wrote with the soy wax some of the words around dyslexia. It's a learning difference. It affects processing speed and decoding, phonological awareness, language difficulty, and then I did the circles and then quilted some of those words around that one. So that's Dyslexia 1. This one is Dyslexia 2. I used a template to paint the words dyslexia on just the cream-coloured fabric with black paint, then chopped it all up, rearranged it, and then I quilted a bit of a definition really about what dyslexia is on that one. And I made a spelling mistake in my quilting, and it was out of pride that I unpicked it and corrected it, but other people have said you should have just left that there, and I absolutely should have. This is Dyslexia 5. You might remember this one from a recent Queensland Quilters show. So this one is called The Good, the Bad and the Brilliant. So when you explain to a child that they do have dyslexia, it is usually quite a relief for them to know the reason why the reading is so difficult for them, because they know they're trying really, really hard, but it doesn't seem like to the teacher often that they are, because they're not making too much progress. So it is very challenging for them, but helping them to see that that's the reason, and there are things that we can do to help them. There are really good things about having dyslexia. 30% of British millionaires have dyslexia, but we also have an overly high number of inmates who have dyslexia as well. So the implications of it can be very, very serious. So in the white section, I've talked about the good things about dyslexia, the ability to think outside of the square, be more creative. In the black section is the more challenging things. Even dyslexic adults will be late for things always. They can't manage a diary. They might not be able to read maps, things like that. Then in the middle, I put the names of some brilliant dyslexics. Some famous ones like Keira Knightley, Jamie, the cook, Richard Branson, and some of my own students as well. Then this is Dyslexia 6. When we talk about dyslexia, a lot of people say, oh yeah, that's where they get the B's and the P's mixed up. What's very interesting is that is not necessarily indicative of dyslexia. That is common for early readers. What is a problem is when it persists way beyond when it should. And so the B and the D get confused, and even the P and the B and the D get confused, and the P and the Q. So we have some strategies that we use to help students to remediate this. And one of the activities, which they really don't like, is reading a line and going reading exactly what's there. So this is what inspired me to make this quilt. So I titled it BDPQ ? When we went camping in Marna Pools, I wouldn't drink anything after 4 o'clock because I didn't want to go to the toilet in the middle of the night. When you stepped out of the tent and put your torch out, you would see eyes, and you didn't know if that was buffalo, very dangerous, an impala, which was fine, possibly a lion, possibly an elephant, hippo, also dangerous. So these were the old Duggar boys. These were the old buffalo that were kicked out of the herd because they were vulnerable and they would be attracted to predators. They used to hang around the campsites because there were people there, so they felt safer. So you had to be very, very careful with the old Duggar boys. That one. So the method for that one is similar to my little quilter Mally. I can't draw, so I used a friend's photo of the buffalo, projected it onto the canvas, drew out an outline of the buffalo, and then did my free motion stitching on that. So I did it just on the canvas itself, essentially just sketching with the needle and thread with the machine, and then I added the batting, and you can see a little bit of the quilting that goes through all 3 layers. And the backing, I wanted to tuck it under because I didn't want to have a border or a binding. So I just tuck that under and stitch it down by hand. My mum passed away in 2013, and it was completely devastating to me. Because we'd shared so much of our sewing together, I actually couldn't go in the sewing room for about 2 years after that. When I did go back in, I managed to do a quilt that really wasn't very good. But a few months after I'd finished that one, I'd seen a photo that was taken by a friend, again in Mana Pools in the Zambezi River, and he was a brilliant photographer. He'd also done his training to be a wildlife guide. He got into the water to take this shot, and his brother was on the land and took a photo of him taking the photo, and I saw both, and I didn't know which one to use, but I chose to take this one that Michael took of this big bull elephant in the Zambezi River. He was blowing bubbles. He was a little bit nervous about Michael being in front of him, but Michael knew exactly what he was doing. That's not something that I would do and what I would recommend for you. But this is my first really most successful art quilt that I've done. It won a blue ribbon in the Queensland Quilt Show in the pictorial category, and that set me off really on what I'm doing now. I did just fabric paint to paint the background, and my technique was, again, to project the picture onto the basic white fabric, sketch out the elephant, and then visor flicks on the batik fabric, cutting it into the tiny squares, and essentially building a puzzle as I was going, which colours and which intensity of colour I needed in the different sections. My quilting on here is what really frustrated me, and that's what led me to go and do the lessons that I have done. Using that same technique, I've done a few more animals and a lot more birds. When I did the photography lesson, we did a full day at Australia Zoo, and then somebody had given me as a gift another half-day session with the photographer. And I thought, oh, I don't want to go to the zoo again. Where can we go? Because I'm very spoilt coming from Zimbabwe. You can go just an hour down the bush and see elephants and giraffes. And so I thought, oh, what can we do? And the photographer suggested that we do some birds. And I honestly thought, oh, birds? In Zimbabwe, we only looked at birds when there were no elephants to look at. So I wasn't too excited, but we went to Lake Baroon near Malani, and I saw the blue wrens for the first time and fell in love. And they have ADHD, so they are very difficult to photograph. So I have just fallen in love with taking bird photos. I made a quilt very, very similar to this one. It was in SOTA exhibition last year. And I put it for sale because we've run out of wall space at home. But then I was really annoyed when it sold because I really liked it. And then I found out about this exhibition in America called Birds of a Fibre. It was near Seattle, and they put a call out internationally for bird quilts. I found out 3 weeks before the deadline, and I thought, I have to enter this. This has got my name all over it. And so I decided, let's make another red bird. And so on top of working full-time, in 3 weeks, I got this one together, dyeing the background with the sun dye, with vegetation from my garden, and doing the tiny little pieces to make the picture of the little scarlet acrobat, I called him. So this one was entered into the exhibition in Lacona, near Seattle. He was accepted. He flew all the way by Australia Post, and he was there for about 2 months, and I just recently got him back a few weeks ago. Some of you might know Grace Cross, a very talented textile artist. She sadly passed away last year. A few months before that, I was lucky enough to go to a workshop at her gallery where she was doing jelly printing. I'd already played a lot with jelly printing myself, but I learned so much from that workshop with her. She did a lot of printing onto baking paper. And the baking paper takes the ink, especially the acrylic ink, so beautifully. You just can't get the same effect on fabric. So I thought, I've got to use this baking paper somehow. How do I make it work in a quilt? So most of these pieces are that baking paper, and I just ironed lightweight Vilene on the back. And then it was robust enough for me to be able to stitch it. So I put together this little quilt using lots of lovely big gum leaves, the same gum leaf collection as you saw in the discharged dyed piece, and stitched that all together and entered this into the exhibition down in Victoria, and I won highly commended for that late last year. I now have stopped putting my work for sale because I have a dream of having a solo exhibition in a gallery one day, so I need to have some sort of a collection, so I'm working towards that. And I love creating. To me, it's like breathing. My happiest day is a Saturday when I don't have to leave the house. I can just go into the sewing room and just work all day. So thank you very much for having me, and thank you to all of the committee of Queensland Quilters.
Thank you, Julie. We've just seen two inspirational quilters show their works. These are, as Julie mentioned, 2Q or 2Quack, depends which school you come from. All our special interest groups, modern, art, applique, they offer so much information and so much talent that if you can come along to any of those meetings, if you have a question, just ask it. People like Julie and Sue Dennis and Pam Hill and so many others that I could name have got so much information that they're willing to share. So if you are a member of Queensland Quilters, please come along to some of these other special interest groups. You don't have to be an artist to come to the art group. You don't have to be an appliqué to come to the appliqué group. Just come along, bring some handwork, bring an open mind and come and enjoy us. I'd like to thank everyone for being here today. I think it's been great. The weather has done what we asked of it. Thank you to the Mr. Whippy Van, to the Story Behind the Coffee, to the Men's Shed, and to the CWA ladies for providing food. Now before you go, please go and buy some more tickets in the bag raffle. They'll be drawn at about 1:30, I think. So if you aren't here, your name will be on there. And please make sure you have a look at the quilts from Toowoomba and Darling Downs, Toowoomba and Dalby inside the hall. Have a look at the challenge quilts. Please go downstairs to the International Women's Day quilts. They were to have a big function at Government House, but of course Alfred got in the road and cancelled that, like he cancelled so many other things. Thank you once again for coming. Please enjoy the rest of your day here with us, and safe journey home. Thank you.